Well, Juan, thanks so much for being part of this study Bible. I really enjoyed reading your notes. Why don't you first tell us who you are? What is it where do you teach, and how did you get into biblical scholarship?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm Juan Martinez. I am a Salvadoran. I was born and raised in El Salvador, and I moved to the U.S. to do my Master's of Divinity at Fuller Seminary. I was working as a youth pastor over there, and I wanted to just get more prepared and to do a better job in leading the church. So that's what led me to doing some theological studies. First Fuller, and then after that, I think my vocation has been like switching a little bit from a pastoral perspective to a more like academic and teaching perspective. So I got involved in with the Centro Latino at Fuller Seminary. That's the center that offers the Spanish speaking programs, masters, doctorate ministry, and currently we're working hard in setting and creating these professional certificates programs that are like trying to bridge this gap between academia and pastoral practitioners, bringing some practical tools with theological teachings. So that's kind of my journey from being a pastor and then coming to academia, and then switching a little bit, getting into the teaching vocation.
So, did you think you would end up going into more academia, or is that kind of a new? Did you not anticipate going that route? Did you think you'd always be in the church?
Yeah, I can say that what I anticipated is staying at the local church.
Sure.
That was my the first impulse that moved me into theological studies. But yeah, it's a new thing, just getting into more and more this vocation of structuring ideas that can help churches to do their job, the mission, to get involved in God's mission in a more healthy, robust way. So I've been more attracted to the teaching side of the
Yeah.
Christian ministry.
Well, your blend of ecclesiological passion and theological passion, it comes out in your writing. I mean, you can tell you're a responsible scholar. You handle the text very well, in my opinion. But I can always sense this like pastoral heart behind your writing. So that makes your background make sense. Yeah. So you did the notes on the theme of migration in the New Testament. Can you first of all help us with the language? We talk about immigration, immigrants, migration. What are the differences here? And what's the proper terminology?
Yes. Well, the general term will be, or the general experience will be human mobility. So that's the movement or the displacement of peoples, right? So that will be migration in general.
Okay.
So any move, any displacement, even within borderlands or across borderlands, will be called like some kind of migration or displacement. So you have variants of that experience. So immigration will be more like from the perspective of the people that are receiving migrants. So that will be the immigration process. But also we have other experiences like forced displacement or forced migration, which is a particular experience non-voluntarily, but out of probably fear, out of some danger. So you're in a sense forced to move, forced to displace yourself or families because of some circumstances. So, in general, that would be the perspective of its human mobility. Uh, but I think, specifically in our context, I think it's more focused on forced displacement, and that experience involves a lot of pain and a lot of vulnerability. So I try to bring that perspective into the reading and to the commentary of the New Testament.
And I mean, you bring in a sense your own experience. You've been in the United States for 6, 7 years or so.
Yeah.
Or, yeah. What's been maybe the greatest challenge in that shift in location?
Yeah, definitely the experience of displacement brings fresh perspective, uh, fresh perspective about your land, about your country, about your communities. So distance gives you like kind of this perspective of what's been happening, and gives you some fresh insights about your identity. Is it the first time you enter a place in which you're not, your identity is not assumed, and you have to explain your identity. Who are you? What is your background? What is your ethnic background? Those questions are not, I didn't have those questions when I was in El Salvador. My identity was assumed. I was a Salvadoran. But then this experience of questioning my identity brought some perspective about this experience of migration and the different experiences of migration. Because my experience was a voluntarily migration. I came to do studies. I came with a visa. So that's a more privileged experience of displacement. So when I came here and I was in contact with brothers and sisters and families that they didn't have the same experience. So that was one of the challenges that I experienced. It's being confronted with my own experience in a sense of privilege, and seeing how can I experience my faith or express my faith in a way that acknowledge that not everyone has the same circles of support. And some people have to migrate because of circumstances that are beyond their control.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the distinction. So, the theme of migration, immigration, that's such a hot political topic, probably everywhere, but especially in the United States. Yeah. And I think people, Christians included, come at this question with their kind of political commitments. I'm excited about your notes in particular because you're going to help us come at these political questions with a more theological focus. Can you give us an overview of what, if we just were looking at the New Testament in particular, what would our view of immigration be?
So what I've been trying to do in study or in reflecting and writing about these commentary is to pay closer attention to the experiences of the characters. Sometimes when we study the Bible and we pay closer attention, we are very or highly focused on the words, translations, the order of the sentences and everything. That's good and it's important. But I am trying to give or to pay closer attention to the story, to the characters. What are the experiences? What they're saying? What they're feeling? Where the context in which they're saying things. Sometimes we just take something that a character just say or stated, and we remove the context. Sometimes because we're not paying attention to the storyline, which being saying the story. So I'm trying to just to get a closer perspective on how, if we pay closer attention, we can see how movement and displacement and human mobility is like it's intrinsic to the stories of the people of God in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament as well. So if we, for example, see how Jesus was born in Nazareth, and then his ministry was in Galilee, but then he moved to Jerusalem, right? That's a movement, that's a displacement, and most of his disciples were from Galilee, and they also moved with him. Right? They moved to Jerusalem, and the first communities of the church in Jerusalem were people not from Jerusalem, but from Galilee. So in a sense, they were strangers in a city. And they had to face also some stereotypes, right? There are some verses in which people will say, what good can come out of Nazareth, for example. Yeah. So there's these experiences of people moving around and then experiencing the challenges of displacement. So then again, we can see in different moments of the New Testament, Paul for example. It's another example of a person that is moving constantly, is displacing himself because of the sake of the gospel. But that experience is part of what he's writing to. And he also writes to communities in Rome, which was a very diverse city, the capital of the empire. So there was a lot of movement, people coming in and out of the city, a lot of displacement. So if we pay closer attention to all that context, we can definitely see how human mobility will be really a part of what people are experiencing throughout the text. But we need to pay closer attention to that.
I think, yeah, it's a question that we don't typically raise, or something we don't typically notice, how much migration there is across the New Testament. But yeah, you take Paul, major figure, Jesus, and their ministries are saturated with migration. And Jesus even experienced as a child forced migration, right? I mean, can you help us understand the significance of that? Of course, after he was born, there was, Herod going to, slaughter the babies. And so they rush him down to Egypt for a period of time, and then he returns. Like, what does that contribute to our current understanding of even forced migration?
Yeah, I think that the whole experience of God being human, in a sense, is displacement, right? The incarnation, right, is this movement from heaven to earth. So from that point, I think Jesus is, to me, what I perceive in the text and the stories of the New Testament. He's identifying himself with the experience of the people of God, who were also people on the move, people in displacement. So in the experience even of going to Egypt, there is a lot of resonance with the story of the people of Israel going to Egypt. So he's embodying this experience. He's embodying the experience of mobility, of human mobility, with all the struggles that experience entails. So I think Jesus being forced to migrate, like the Holy Family being forced to move out of a danger, a threat against their lives, I think it's also a powerful theological, I would say, embodiment of what it means to be the Son of God, to be God incarnate, to be identified with human, with the human grace, with the human experience.
Yeah.
So I think I would say Jesus will be one of the main characters that will be moving in the whole story. He will be displacing himself different parts. So yeah, I think that's an important perspective and insight that we need to bring to the reading.
How should the modern church, and I'll just keep it in the United States context, as many of our readers are from. And I think you bring a great perspective because you know from being outside of the United States and now living inside of the United States. I mean, so you can kind of, I think you're able to see things that people just born and raised in the United States may not be able to see as easily. For a Christian who is reading the New Testament with these questions in mind, and hopefully reading your notes and going back and seeing how the text addresses these themes. What should a Christian walk away with? Like, what should the modern perspective on migration, immigration, even debates about what's going on at the border of the United States now, like how should the church respond to those questions?
That's a good question. I think the same energy and effort to pay closer attention to the text, we need to put the same effort to pay closer attention to the stories of people around us. So I think we need to remove ourselves. One of the stories that I was reflecting was the Good Samaritan, and how Jesus flipped the question, in which the person that came to Jesus asked, "Who is my neighbor?" And Jesus at the end flipped the question, and he asked, who are you going to be a neighbor to? So he puts the responsibility in this person to remove himself and to be in proximity to other experiences, to be a neighbor. So I think one of the big challenges today for us as Christians is to pay attention to the stories that are beyond our comfort zone. We need to look around and pay attention to the pain, to the struggles, particularly, I would say, to the most affected communities and families in our systems. We need to pay closer attention to those stories too, and then put those insights in conversation with the stories of the Bible, with the stories of our faith, of our ancestors. But we need both uh, insights, not just dealing with text, not just struggling with words, but also being in the sometimes uncomfortable positions of being in a place of learning about stories and experiences that are not like us, uh, but will bring important insights into the way we read the Bible, and also insights into the way we live our faith as Christians.
One of the political questions the church wrestles with today is, what side of these immigration debates should we be on? Like, should we have more, not, more open border type policies where we allow more and more immigrants into the country, or should we limit that, because that's going to hurt the American economy, or whatever the argument might be. What's, in your view, like, how does the New Testament sort of address that kind of question, if it does at all?
Well, it's a complicated task to compare the context. But I will say political powers has always been part of the story, and powers that also, in the language of the Bible, will be the Babylonian spirit, or Bible spirit, right? The spirit that centralizes the power, the spirit that controls people, the spirit that exploits human beings, that exploits the earth, or the land, or the soil. And I think the gospel, even from Abraham, has always been presented in contrast, right? In contrast to the spirit of in New Testament will be the spirit of the world, that is not according to the kingdom of God. So I think, in my perspective, what we need to be attentive to is to the spirit of Babel, of Babylon, the spirit that exploits the lives of the people, that the spirit that disregards the dignity of the people. Whenever we see a message, whenever we see a tendency to criminalize, or to put tags, or to put stereotypes that dehumanize other peoples, other cultures, other communities, people that are not like ours, I think we should be aware, and then be concerned, and then say the politics, in a sense, in a broader sense, the politics of that we as Christians need to embrace are the politics of the dignity of all human beings, all created in the image of God. And I think that could be a way of navigate these very difficult conversations. We're not experts in policies, right? I'm not an expert in political discourses or all that, but I can be an expert in what my tradition, my ancestors have been doing for generations, with hospitality, open their homes, open their hearts to different stories. Even in Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews says that we, by receiving people, we may be receiving angels,
Yeah.
messengers from God. So that's a tradition that we have inherited, the tradition of hospitality. And I think I believe and I feel that that should be the path that the Christian church needs to take in these very confusing times that we're living.
I like that. That's really helpful. I often think of, like, when I hear Christians talk in America about these, political issues like immigration, there can be this like us versus them spirit. Like, no, they are coming into our country. But I think that's just a wrong perspective. We should have a global kingdom perspective, because a lot of people who might have been born on the other side of this wall we have are actually brothers and sisters in Christ. I remember talking to one pastor, I think down in Southern Texas here, that deal works with a lot of people coming across the border, sometimes, legally, illegally, undocumented, and I asked him, I said, how many, just broadly speaking, how many would you say are like committed believers? He said about 90% that they encounter. Not one or two, not a few. And it's like this political perception that there's all these other people coming in. Like, no, this is the family coming in. Which leads to, I guess, another. This is probably one of the more heated or disputed parts of this conversation. How should Christians respond to undocumented immigrants? And there's this tension of we need to care for the other, care for the marginalized, care for the sojourner, and yet we're also called to obey governing authorities. How does the New Testament help us wrestle with, I guess, this tension, if you even see a tension there?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there will be like different approaches to this particular topic. I think there's one text that I reflected on in the commentary about how to relate with political powers and authorities. And and I'm not the first one saying that. I think in other places has been said this concept of subversive submission. So we need to inhabit the system. We need to be part of the system, in a sense that we function within the system. But we are navigating the system in a subversive way, in a way that resists the tendencies of the system to destroy, to kill, to steal. So it's a subversive submission in the sense that we acknowledge their laws, that we participate in a society with laws, and we want that structure to function within a society. And at the same time, recognize that many times laws and policies do not reflect the kingdom of God. So when that happens, how do we manage to be Christians? And there are more examples in the New Testament in which disciples said, it is better for us to obey God than the system or the laws of the system. When they found out that some expressions of that system were not aligned with what God has said about humanity, what God has said about our human dignity, our brothers and sisters. And again, when they found out that part of the systems are aligned with the world and not with the kingdom, then I think we need to navigate the system in a subversive way. Still navigating the laws, still navigating the policies, but subverting the ways in which the system is not reflecting how God wants us to live in the community.
That makes a lot of New Testament sense. I think Martin Luther King said, believers, Christians have a moral obligation to break an unjust law. Like if there is something that, is not promoting justice, then we shouldn't follow, those laws. In your, so you already you came into this study with a lot of previous knowledge of this theme and the passages. Did you learn in your going through these passages again and writing these study notes, is there anything that you discovered that you didn't know before, or maybe something that really stands out that maybe you hadn't fully appreciated before this study?
Yeah, there was one passage, Matthew 25. Jesus was talking about, it was kind of a parable, but it's one of the very direct parables. So he's talking about how at the end, he will gather the nations and they will differentiate the nations, taking into consideration how they treated the people who were in jail, the people who were with hunger, the people who were in vulnerable positions. So he will say the people who treated, the nations who treated the vulnerable communities in a good way, they did it to me. So there is a radical identification of Jesus, of God, I would say, with the vulnerable, with the vulnerable communities and families. But what really, it was new to me to reflect, it was that in the context, in broader context of this passage, Jesus has already told the disciples that they are going to be displaced. In the apocalyptic discourse, he told them that they're going to face persecutions, that they're going to face difficult moments in which they will need to flee.
There'll be forced migration, right? With the believers,
He anticipated them that they would be forced to migrate. So in this particular context, this parable to me resonated a lot as kind of an anticipating, I would say, hymn of resistance. That's what I believe Jesus was saying. When you face those circumstances of forced migration, when you are in the middle of that, just remember that God is on your side, that God is with you, that God identify himself with you in that condition of being imprisoned, of being in hunger, of being forcibly displaced. So to me, that was a blessing to reflect how he was anticipating an experience and giving them a tool to be that parable became a tool of the disciples to remember in the middle of the crisis that God is on our side in the middle of this, that the way the nations treat us is the way they're treating God. So they need to be thinking about how they are treating us as people in a vulnerable condition, because this is an important criteria for the final judgment, and that what Jesus was trying to share with the disciples.
That's so good. Well, Juan, I'm so thankful for your contribution to the study Bible, and I just love how you're able to bring in your own personal experience, your expertise as a biblical scholar, and weave those together. I think that's just so powerful. I love. I mean, obviously you have the academic credentials, so I wasn't, I knew that would be there, but I just love how you're able to speak very ecclesiologically and prophetically even through these sometimes difficult passages, So thank you so much for your contribution to the study Bible.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me in this interesting, really exciting project that you're into.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.